You are being read right now, not by a camera, not by an algorithm, by a person, probably someone you have already decided is quiet, forgettable, or simply background noise. And while you were busy forming that opinion about them, they finished forming a complete and surprisingly accurate one about you. That is not a metaphor. That is the specific, documented way that quiet observers process social environments. And most people go their entire lives never realizing it is happening to them. Here is what makes this genuinely worth paying attention to. Quiet observers are not gifted with some mysterious sixth sense. They are not supernatural. What they have is something far more practical and far more dangerous to anyone who assumes silence means absence. They have learned, either by necessity or by nature, to extract enormous amounts of information from the details everyone else dismisses as irrelevant. And the three things they zero in on are not what most people expect. We will get to all three, but there is one in particular, the second thing on this list, that tends to stop people cold when they hear it, because it does not just reveal what quiet observers notice. It reveals something about yourself that you have probably never consciously examined. Stay with me until we get there. The first thing a quiet observer notices is how you treat uncertainty. Not how you handle pressure. Everyone performs under pressure when they know they are being watched. Uncertainty is different. Uncertainty is the moments between the moments. The pauses where no one has told you what to do next, and your instincts take over before your self-awareness catches up. Watch someone at a dinner table when the conversation briefly dies. Some people immediately reach for their phone. Others scan the room. Some fill the silence with a joke. Some sit completely still and wait. Each of these responses is a window not into personality type, but into a person's underlying relationship with discomfort. Quiet observers notice this because they live in uncertainty themselves. Silence is their natural environment. So when they watch someone else encounter it, they recognize the tells instantly. The micro-scramble for something to do, the forced laugh that arrives a beat too early, the sudden intense interest in a menu or a phone screen. These are not flaws. They are honest signals. And honest signals are exactly what a quiet observer is always looking for. What makes this more layered is that how you handle uncertainty in small moments is almost always consistent with how you handle it in large ones. The person who reflexively grabs their phone at a quiet dinner table is often the same person who deflects with humor when a serious conversation gets too close to the truth. Patterns repeat. Quiet observers know this, and they trust the small moments more than the big performances. But that is only the surface layer of what they are tracking. Because underneath the behavior itself is something far more telling. The specific thing you reach for when uncertainty hits. And that detail alone can tell a quiet observer more about your inner world than an hour of direct conversation ever could. Which leads us to the second thing. And this one is where it gets uncomfortable. The second thing a quiet observer notices is the gap between who you are when you want something and who you are when you do not. Most people believe they are consistent. They think their values, their warmth, their patience. These are stable traits that show up regardless of the situation. But human behavior does not work that way, and quiet observers know it. Watch how someone treats a waiter when the order is wrong. Watch how quickly a person's tone shifts when they realize the person they are speaking to has no influence over the outcome they want. Watch how generosity appears and disappears depending on who is in the room and what is at stake. These are not random fluctuations in mood. They are the clearest possible map of a person's actual character. Not the character they believe they have, but the one that operates automatically when no performance is required. Quiet observers are uniquely positioned to catch this because they are never the center of attention. They exist slightly outside the social transaction. And from that position, they see the full frame, including the edges that most participants miss entirely. Here is what makes this uncomfortable. The gap they are detecting is not between your good days and bad days. It is between your conscious values and your automatic behavior. Most people have genuinely good intentions. But intentions live in the prefrontal cortex, the thoughtful, deliberate part of the brain. Automatic behavior lives somewhere older and faster. And the two do not always agree. You might genuinely believe you are patient. But a quiet observer has watched you interrupt 3 times in one conversation. You might genuinely believe you are humble. but they noticed the way your posture changed the moment someone else received a compliment. None of this makes you a bad person. It makes you human. But it also means you are far more legible than you think, at least to someone paying the right kind of attention. And if that feels exposing, here is something that might reframe it. Quiet observers are not watching you to catch you failing. They are watching because they are trying to understand the full truth of who they are dealing with. There is a significant difference between surveillance and comprehension. What they are doing is closer to the latter. But here is where it gets really interesting, because the gap between intention and automatic behavior is not the deepest thing they are tracking. It is only the doorway to it. What lies behind that door is something quieter, older, and far more fundamental to who you are. It is the thing you are most afraid to need. The vulnerability you have spent years learning to disguise so well that you have almost convinced yourself it is not there. You do not announce it. You do not even think about it consciously most of the time. But it shapes nearly every social decision you make, what you say, what you avoid, who you gravitate toward, and who makes you instinctively defensive. And a quiet observer, given enough time in the same room as you, will find it. Not because they are trying to, because it is the thing that everything else points toward. That is the third thing, and it changes everything. The third thing a quiet observer notices is your core wound. And they find it by watching what makes you overreact. Not react, overreact. There is a precise difference, and it matters enormously. A reaction is proportional. Something mildly annoying produces mild irritation. Something genuinely threatening produces genuine alarm. But an overreaction is a reaction that does not match the size of the trigger. And whenever that mismatch appears, it marks something important. A place where old pain is still active, still raw, still running in the background like an unresolved program. Everyone has at least one. Maybe you shut down completely when you feel ignored, even briefly, even unintentionally. Maybe you become quietly aggressive when your competence is questioned, even in a joking context. Maybe you over-explain yourself in situations where no explanation was actually requested, as if you are always pre-defending against a judgment that has not been made yet. These patterns feel normal from the inside because they have been there so long. From the outside, to someone watching without agenda, they stand out with startling clarity. Quiet observers do not need you to confess your history. Your overreactions do it for them. And here is what makes this the most profound of the three things. Because this is not just about being read. This is about being known at a level that most relationships never reach. The people in your life who love you loudly often know your story. But a quiet observer who has simply watched you navigate a few ordinary situations may understand your interior world more accurately than people who have known you for decades. Not because they are smarter, because they are paying a different kind of attention. Most people listen to respond. Quiet observers watch to understand. That single distinction creates an entirely different quality of perception, one that bypasses the curated version of yourself you present and lands directly on the unedited one underneath. So what do they do with all of this? That is the question most people jump to, and it reveals something interesting in itself. The assumption is that this level of perception must come with an agenda. That anyone who sees this clearly must be planning to use it somehow. But in reality, most quiet observers carry what they notice with a kind of careful respect. They are not building a case. They are building understanding. And the ones who have developed this ability most deeply tend to be the least likely to weaponize it, because they see their own wounds just as clearly as they see yours. If you recognize yourself as a quiet observer, this is worth sitting with. The gift you carry is real. But so is the responsibility that comes with seeing people accurately, which is to hold what you see gently and never use someone's truth against them. And if you recognize yourself as someone who has been seen this way, if you have ever felt that strange, slightly unsettling feeling of being truly known by someone who said almost nothing, now you understand why. They were not guessing. They were not lucky. They were simply doing what they have always done. Watching the small things, following where they lead, and finding the whole person hiding inside the details everyone else walked past without a second glance.